Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Pussycat. Now, just kidding. The good, the bad, and the Bible. Nothing's changed. But I thought, it's been so long since I have brought Jin Tom into one of my videos that it's been a while. I figured y'all would want to see him, see how much bigger he's gotten. And he's gotten huge. He's still only just under a year and a half. And this is how big he's gotten. This is how big he's gotten. And I'm a big guy myself. So, this guy's huge. And he wasn't even quite as big as his parents. Like, of course, he was probably a little smaller back then, but yeah. And now we're outside, and now he wants to go explore. And so that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to let him go do. You going to go... You ready to go? You ready to be done being on the camera? It's like, hell yeah, man, let me go. But yes, this is my boy. And that's how big he's gotten. Alright. And today is going to be an extra heavy topic as well. So, no, I told you, you're going to get dirty if you go in there. Been trying to go into this tree behind me has this little opening, and he's been trying to get in there because he likes his, cats love their dark corner spaces, but I'd rather he not get filthy. He's gonna get dirty enough being outside. Oh. He's good. So, what are we talking about today in the Bible? Well, especially what are we talking about that would warrant needing to start off with a feline presence? Well. It's not well. Let's put it that way. But we won't get to that part till the end of our time today. We're going to start things off a little light. It's not a super positive, I would say, thing that they're doing necessarily. I mean, obviously for them it is, but I think this would be applicable in other ways. And so we are at the beginning of chapter 18 today, in Deuteronomy. Almost forgot. Need our burning bush to go along with these fine words of Moses. AKA Yahweh. Or AKA Moses. Since Moses is the one that is writing everything. And at the beginning of chapter 18, this is actually curious, and I'm just gonna share with you what's here. You can read it. It goes from verse 1 all the way to verse 8, and it may seem insignificant when you're reading through it, but what it's basically saying is that the one tribe of Israel, because remember there are 12 tribes, there were 12 original brothers, and all these tribes came from the individual brothers. There is one tribe that is treated a little bit differently than the rest, because it is the tribe of Levi. The tribe of Levi they are the descendants of, obviously, the son Levi, and they are the priests. They are the lineage of priests. They technically, from what I understand, they can't go to war, but that's not really part of this portion here. This is actually talking about their inheritance when they get to the promised land. And they are actually not allowed to have land. And I'm almost wondering if they're even allowed to have regular jobs. I mean, maybe they are, outside of priestly duties, but they all get a portion of food that is brought to them from the sacrifices. And the reason why I bring that up as a positive thing is because even though I don't really support the idea of tax-free religions. Like, if you're gonna make everyone pay tax, then you should definitely include churches, because they make a ridiculous amount of money and they have more than enough. In fact, I think you should tax them instead of people. I mean, if they're making bank, if a preacher's got a private jet and a mansion and all that, come on, government's missing out on some serious money right there. And it's not doing anyone any good. So, like, come on. But what would I do? Where would I deviate that spending, that money, that food? And honestly, I don't know where these Levites live. I don't know if it doesn't really say. There probably is a portion laid out for them, like on the temple grounds or the tabernacle or something. But there's nothing given right here. They're specifically told that they do not get individual property. Maybe there's a property they all share together, but they don't become individual landowners. And what I would apply these rules to, government, basically, maybe government land, government, provided food based off the taxes and all that. Who would I deviate this to instead of religious people / religions? I would deviate this towards artists, because people who genuinely love performing art, creating art, that's really all they want. They don't need a whole lot to be happy. And that is because that's one of the secrets to life. When you discover what makes you happy and what you want to do, as long as it covers your bills, you're happy. You're great. You don't need a crazy amount of stuff to be happy. That's something I'm learning just living out of my van. Well, I mean, I was learning that before I was living out of my van, but it re-emphasizes it now. So yeah, I think it should be artists instead, because artists are, in a way, they're like the independent religious people of society. They're the ones that aren't going to work every single day because they're doing a completely different kind of work. They're diving into themselves. They're diving into what they understand is humanity, and then they express that in their art. And then people who are not artists, or some of them I'm sure are, because artists do appreciate other artists' work, but the people that are coming in to see this artwork, to pay for it, to buy it, even if they're not artists themselves, they feel a connection to that art. They feel something deep within them. And it just kind of sucks that you have to be someone famous to just slosh some paint across a canvas and be able to sell it for thousands or even millions of dollars. I think that's a little stupid. I think it's a little lopsided. And if we implemented something like this rule into society, but for artists instead of the religious focus, I think that would be really cool. Maybe it's something that needs to be added to society or, switched around, but, churches make more money than artists. So why are we giving them the easy time, and the artists that are non-biased in their self-expression, they get nothing until they're famous, if they get famous. And it's only a small handful that ever does. Which, of course, that's always how it's going to be, but I just personally feel like being an artist should be able to be a full-time job, even if you're not making a ton of money at it. But the economy isn't set up to appreciate artists that way. So, but otherwise, I think it's not a bad idea. Artists don't care about owning land. They don't care too much about owning property. and having a bunch of stuff, so they would be the perfect people to apply this sort of rule to, in my personal, unprofessional opinion. But that's enough positivity for now. Let's dive right back into the negativity, because that's what comes right after. Because listen to how he throws it all together. He says in verse 10, "There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch." He just goes straight from child sacrifice right into mysticism, right into being able to predict the future, talking to spirits, and all that shit. He compares them to being the exact same. And I think that's kind of messed up. Because, I mean, it's also kind of hypocritical at the same time. Because if you think about it, God is only specifying a certain way that he disapproves of child sacrifice. A lot of people think that this verse is evidence for God not only being against mysticism, but also against child sacrifice. And some people will argue that Abraham, going to sacrifice his son, even though he didn't go through with it, some people say that counts. But honestly, we don't need to count that to know that Yahweh approves of child sacrifice. Because every time that Moses / God commands all the males of a city or nation to be wiped out, that's essentially the same thing. They're being commanded to unalive young ones in the name of God. Like, why should you need an altar for that to count? It's the same thing. When he sent the angel of death into Egypt to unalive all the firstborn of Egypt, that included children. Those were essentially given to him. He demanded them. All the sacrifices that he asks for are demanded, including the quote-unquote free will ones. There might be more creativity to them, but they're still demanded multiple times. And what makes it even more hypocritical is that, God really lays into how much this mysticism is so offensive to him, calling them abominations. And why is it hypocritical? Because God turns right around in verse 15, right after saying in verse 14, don't be like the other nations, don't have witches, don't have wizards, don't have enchanters, because I have decreed that you are not allowed to have these things. Verse 15, the Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee. So they couldn't read the future or speak to spirits or whatever the other nation's way. That's an abomination. They could only do it Yahweh's way. Unalive everyone else that does it in other religions' names. Even unalive them if they're right and they're doing it in other religions' names. We saw that in one of the previous episodes. Because I'm going to give you my own. I'm going to give you my own wizard. I'm not going to call him a wizard or a diviner or an enchanter. I'm going to use a totally different name, even though he's going to do the exact same thing. Because other religions can't, but mine can. It is breezier out here than it looks. There we are. So yes, don't be like other nations, but be like them at the same time. Just be like them my way, is essentially what he's saying. And he reiterates verse 20. The prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. Wonderful. How free, how religiously tolerant of Yahweh. This God is totally not a bloodthirsty, fair. Let me read it. Let me say that again. He is totally not a bloodthirsty or unfair or non-narcissistic individual at all. He's especially not bloodthirsty. I mean, the next passage totally doesn't prove that, does it? Oh. Shit. It does. And it's in the very next chapter. Now, do you remember the cities of refuge? Well, if you don't, they're brought back again. And they are mentioned once more. And we are reminded, in case we forgot, or in case, in case he left anything out, and had to, reiterate some things. There were only to be 3 cities of refuge. And now, what are the cities of refuge? The cities of refuge were for in case there was an accidental death caused by someone. Let's say, the case they use here is 2 men are chopping wood, and, maybe they're back to back or something, kind of at a distance, and, one of them goes back to swing, and the axe head goes flying off the handle, hits his buddy in the head, and his buddy drops dead. The city of refuge was there in case someone, let's say the person who, let's say it was Philip and Terrence, just for shits and giggles. South Park fans will get it. But let's say Philip is chopping a tree and his axe head goes swinging off and hits Terrence in the head, and Terrence drops dead. Well, if Terrence's relatives didn't believe that it was accidental and they wanted to commit revenge on Philip, Philip would be able to run away to a city of refuge and he would be protected. For some reason, he wouldn't be protected anywhere else, only in one of these 3 cities of refuge. He would be protected, supposedly the relatives would not sneak in or whatever, but they would be protected from the vengeful relatives. And that was the point of the cities of refuge. And that is what is stated in verse 6, lest the avenger of the blood pursue the slayer while his heart is hot, and overtake him because the way is long, and he slay him. Whereas he was not worthy of death, inasmuch as he hated him not in the past. If you read the context, there is nothing that says that these people that killed Philip, that unalived Philip, should be punished, even though Philip was technically innocent. The biggest issue with this passage is that there are only 3 cities of refuge, and not all the cities are cities of refuge in Israel. They should all be cities of refuge for an innocent person. It should not make a difference what city this person goes into. The judges of all the cities should be doing the law justly. There's It makes no sense for there to only be 3 cities, and I guarantee there are more than 3 cities in Israel. It's unfair. Sure, the cities are evenly spread out throughout Israel, but it makes no sense why the person who did not mean to commit the murder should be unsafe in any city other than these 3. And there should be no allowance. Like, there should be a punishment for the people unjustly going after Philip, because it wasn't his fault. And that is the biggest blunder of this entire passage. But there are a couple fun points to this chapter that I do find rather interesting, and I think it would be very interesting as a social experiment to see, just how things went. It might not be good for mental health, which is why I emphasize it being an experiment, but I think some of you will find this rather amusing. Let's say Philip did intentionally kill or unalive Terence, and he ran away to the city of refuge, and the judges determined that Philip was indeed guilty of murder. Then, it says in verse 12, the elders of his city shall send and fetch him thence, and deliver him into the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. And it does not specify how they are to be unalived. So it could be completely up to the relatives of Philip, to the relatives of Terence, what they do to Philip for purposefully unaliving their friend and family member. But it seems like it's fine if they get a hold of him either way. That's just what's messed up about it. Whether he's innocent or not, there's no punishment for this. But if he's guilty, definitely hand him over. Okay, I mean, yeah, that's great. But what about if he's innocent and they get him? Like, we're just gonna let feuds start like that and go unpunished? Like, oh, it's like playing life and death tag. Like, oh, I'm in a city of refuge. You can't kill me, but if I want to, even if you do it accidentally, I can come back and get you. Like, I feel like this is it's like allowing a feud. It's like allowing a family feuds to happen, but with a city of refuge for the people that do it accidentally. Like, what if people just have accidental deaths of feuds going back and forth between families, and no one's ever able to prove that they're accidents? Like, how messed up would that be? Good thing people evolved past this stuff, but still, this is what's given to us supposedly by Almighty God. This is the best that Yahweh can come up with to deal with these people. It might be the best a limited human being who's power hungry might come up with, but the Almighty God of the universe that can create such magnificent detail in our bodies and in nature and just in literally everything, could only come up with the idea of only 3 cities of refuge, and doesn't have the moral understanding to straight up order the Avengers of Terence to tell them, hey, this is not okay. No revenge. But he doesn't. He doesn't say that. He basically allows revenge to happen if you can get Philip before he gets to a city of refuge. Whether he's innocent or not, whether it was an accident or not, if you can catch Philip, before he gets to a city of refuge and unalive him, there will be no consequences for you. Suck to be you if you were Philip, huh? Yeah, that's not justice right there. It might be justice to hand them over if they're genuinely guilty. But then let's look at something that I think is really good, really great. I think you guys will really approve of this one. Let's say you're in court and you're caught lying. According to Deuteronomy 19, verses 18 through 21. Well, we'll just read 2 verses, 18 and 19. The judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness, and hath testified falsely against his brother. Verse 19, then shall ye do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put away the evil from among you. Oh yeah, but I like this little bit in verse 21. And thine eye shall not pity. But life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So what this means, basically, is if you're lying in court, and you're caught, and you were trying to get someone else in trouble, and you were trying to get them to pay a fine, or perhaps alimony, and you were caught lying, you would be the one paying that fine or paying that alimony. You trying to get him thrown in prison? You get caught lying in court, you get the sentence of whatever length of time the victim was going to get, that you were trying to get thrown in prison. That's what you get instead. Were you trying to get them the death penalty? And you got caught lying in court? Ooh. Yeah. Life for life. And honestly, I am 100% down with this being applied to our justice system. I think that would be great. I think that would be a fantastic deterrent to keep people from lying in court. Maybe we would have more honest judges. More honest people in general. That'd be amazing. But I think that'd be such a swell idea. Alright. And now we come to what's going to tie us into the crazy shit. We are once again going to be talking about the worst of the worst. But it's going to get wild. It's going to get bad. When we get to the tie-in. Right now, we're just at the beginning of the tie-in. Chapter 20. And it all starts in verse 10. And then we come to another good little portion that I approve of. And this is honestly quite amazing right here. This is something I know y'all have never heard of. In the first half of the next chapter, chapter 20, Moses goes through a whole list of people that are allowed to leave from the military whenever they go off to war. And I'm not going to read the verses. I'm just going to run through this real quick. But it is, he says, if there is anyone who has a house that they just bought and they haven't dedicated it yet, or, done the typical, house warming stuff, basically. Of course, this is referring to religious, their religious version of that. If anyone has planted a vineyard and not eaten of it yet, I don't know. That's actually interesting. I don't know why it says vineyard specifically and not a farm. Maybe it refers to that as well. But anyone who has basically started a crop and never eaten from it before, they could leave. Anyone who just got married or is going to be engaged, they are allowed to leave. And then they say, and also anyone who's afraid, who's afraid to go to war, who is faint-hearted, let him leave. He doesn't have to fight. Ain't that some shit? Kind of goes against the whole mandatory draft that they have going on in Israel now, where they make everyone serve. I'm pretty sure they do not apply this rule anymore these days, but this wouldn't be a bad idea, to be honest. You might lose some numbers, but hey, at least you won't have any cowards on the battlefield. You'll have people that they've said their goodbyes, they're ready to go, they feel like they've done enough and are prepared to die if necessary. Like, that's great. Like, to have an army that consists of nothing but that, like, that's one of the best kind of armies to have right there when it comes to, their spirit, their morale, and everything. Yeah, you don't want cowards. You don't want people that have their minds stuck on home and things going on back at home that they're obsessed about, that they feel like they need to get done. And this is basically giving a bit of a loophole for that. This is making sure that the ranks are gonna stay strong. Excellent, excellent, excellent idea. Big thumbs up. Big thumbs up for Moses/Yahweh on this one. And then comes verse 10. When thou comest nigh unto a city to fight against it, then proclaim peace unto it. Ha ha! That sounds great at first, doesn't it? I'll just wait until we get into it. Because it's gonna get... it's gonna get familiar. By the way, I realize that I'm looking at the opposite end of the screen sometimes, and I am sorry about that. I'm used to having, for some reason, I've always tended to have my camera on the other side, but today, with the way the wind was blowing, I didn't want wind blowing into the microphone, so that's why I've got it switched, and apparently I need to work on being more ambidextrous at which side the camera is. So, sorry if I'm doing this a lot. Trying to connect. But right, let's get to it. And yeah, this is gonna take a second join. For sure. My workout later should be interesting. I don't like working out after smoking weed, but this is actually the third or fourth time, third altogether, third overall time that I've made this video. Like, I've literally recorded this entire thing 2 other times. And, you know, not that the other times weren't okay, but I did forget some stuff here and there, and this is a really important subject that we're about to get into, because it's going to tie into the modern day, unfortunately. I'll be sharing some things with you I feel that are just very necessary, but right now let's get to this. Let's get back to how the Israelites are meant to proclaim peace. What their idea of peace is. And you'll see how it applies to the modern day. Modern day events that are currently happening, that you may or may not be aware of, but it's all connected to what I talk about here, and I feel that it is more important than ever that we take our beliefs seriously. Not at living them. Yes, we do need to take living them seriously, but also analyzing them. Looking for cracks in the foundation. Looking for mold. Looking for moral issues. So let's talk about some right here. And it shall be that if the city makes answer to thee of peace and open unto thee, then it shall be that all the people that is found therein shall be tributaries unto thee. Great so far, right? Just tribute, just paying them, and they shall serve thee. There is nothing mentioned in how they are meant to serve, or in what capacity, or to what degree. There's nothing mentioned like that. It just says, and they shall serve thee. No details given as to how, or how else they're meant to be treated otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, but what if they don't want to pay? What if they don't want to serve? Maybe they want peace, but they don't want to serve. Verse 12. And if it will make no peace with thee, or at least not peace on your terms, according to what Moses is saying, but will make war against thee, then thou shalt besiege it. And when the Lord thy God hath delivered it into thine hands, thou shalt smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword. This does not specify if this includes male children or not. But it says every male. It does not say every male man, just every male. But the women and the little ones, interesting that it says little ones, it doesn't say little girls. it just says little ones. So maybe there's a term that, I don't know. I don't know why they would specify that if all the males were dead. Like, why would you say all the children why would you say children specifically if literally all the males were dead. I don't know. So maybe that's a hint that only the male adults were killed. I don't know. I'm just reading to you what is right here in the King James Version. But regardless, it's terrible. And verse 14, thus shalt thou do unto all the cities which are very far off from thee, which are not of the cities of these nations. And again, there is no limit set on how far out these cities are. It almost seems like they had no concept of big nations back then. Everything was a lot smaller. Everything was a lot more condensed. Almost like Yahweh couldn't think on a, Israel versus Russia, China, and a bunch of other power countries. Now they do have, of course, they have the U.S. on their side. We are one of their servants, even though we haven't been conquered or threatened by them. We are in their pocket. But this is how. I mean, you can kind of see the potential issue with what's going on here, with the lack of details that is given. There's no boundary set. There's no, if bigger than you. Like, if they have nukes, it's all sword and shields and bows and arrows and spears and javelins that they got at this time. That's their technology, basically. And, they're not thinking future-wise. They're not thinking of what future technologies could happen. They're not thinking about what other people could have and how many more numbers they could have. They don't realize how small they themselves are. It's kind of hilarious. Like, they don't realize how big the world is. How many more people are out there that it's like, hey, if you piss off enough people, they're going to gang up on you. But for some reason, Moses / Yahweh is acting like, nah, y'all can take them all. You'll if you take them one by one, you'll get them all. And maybe that would be true. That would be true, except when they're not realizing that, when humans get to hear about bullying, no matter on what level it is, there's eventually a gang up. There's a fight. There's going to be teeth knocked out on both sides, at the least. Like, it's not great, but when people think they can just take, they're, at some point, a lot of them are going to be okay with coming to blows to keep everything that they took. But Moses / Yahweh here isn't taking into account the fact that people are going to get pissed off and are going to gang up to stop you. He thinks they're just going to, take them all one by one. And to be fair, there's nothing here that says that they have to go out and fight all these other cities. There's no call for conquest across the entire world in this passage. It does say this is what you'll do. Hold on. Thus shalt thou do unto all the cities which are very far off from thee. So maybe this could be interpreted as that. Maybe they're meant to be a warrior nation, like Islam. But you can kind of see how someone would argue for that. Because that's exactly what we're seeing here. And, you know, this idea of mercy, or, you know, peace, peace. There's no real mercy here. It's just you either pay up and serve, or you get destroyed and have all your women and children taken. Oh, unless you're in one of these 6 or 7, and I say 6 or 7 because there are other passages with 1 or 2 other, so it could be 8. But I think it's usually on average it's 6 or 7. I don't know why they change, but this one says 6. If you happen to be in one of these 6 nations, of the cities of these people which the Lord thy God doth give thee for an inheritance, thou shalt save alive nothing that breatheth. 100% guarantee genocide. 100% command of genocide. Over 6 times. Now, just to clarify, the Nazis were not good people. But they weren't trying to commit genocide of 6 different races. This is insane. What the Nazis did was terrible. A lot of the shit that Stalin did was worse, and people don't even talk about that. And then there's Genghis Khan, who also literally affected the environment by how many people he took out. And that guy wasn't even racist. He was not biased. I mean, okay, he had some biases, I'm sure, but the reports on him are so mixed that it's like it seemed like he was not the type of person that cared what race you were. He just took out everyone that did not comply. These are 6 nations specifically targeted. And yeah, maybe they were a lot smaller back then because they're being limited to just cities. But, I mean, technically you can limit any nation in the world right now as to just cities. Thou shalt utterly destroy them, it says. So, this is where we tie in. This is where I have to drop the trigger warning of what's going to be coming up. A lot of people don't like to admit or accept the fact that there have been extremist groups of every religion out there. Even Buddhism, sadly. But, I mean, thankfully that's, pretty sure that was a one-time thing. I would have to brush up on that history to be sure, but they're not, they're not known for being violent. That was some shit a while back. But it is an issue. Religious extremism is an issue that persists to this day. And it's starting to get really out of hand, folks. And I'm not just referring to Islam. Everyone knows about that. It's ridiculous that people would try and hide and pretend that they don't still exist, but they are actually growing in numbers, specifically in Europe. And I will drop some links about that, where I got all my information. And why am I bringing up them? Well, I mean, first off, because it's just as real of an issue. They're not the only ones I'm going to be mentioning. But also because they are a cousin religion to Judaism. And this is also something I just learned recently. They have more than just the Quran, as does Judaism. Judaism has more than just the Torah. So there are other books with other things mentioned that are not in the Bible. Some Jews take them serious, take those other books and those other sayings seriously. Others do not. Thank God for the ones that do not. Because there is an unfortunate rise in number of the ones that do. Some of them have political power. And the ones I'm referring to specifically are in a cult that starts with the letter Z. I'm not going to say it. We could call them Zeists if we wanted. But just to try and extend how much longer I can keep this video on YouTube without it getting removed. Because I know YouTube is in on the censoring bullshit. But yeah, it's become a very huge concern out there. Europe is multiple European countries that have been taking lots of illegal immigrants have been suffering from extremist gangs going about harming unaliving, as well as forcing intercourse, as well as grooming and pimping. And it's unfortunate because so much of their anger is fueled by what they accuse the Jews of having done. They've always been at odds with the Jews, it seems, ever since Ishmael, the Bible story with Abraham. Well, more recent than that, to be honest. Because there was a short period where I think they did get along. I'm not 100% certain, I'm no history expert. But what I do know is that regardless of the past, and unfortunately that what we are discovering about the present is making the past and accusations of what Muslims have to say about the Jews seem more and more legitimate, unfortunately. Certain ones, let's be specific here, We're not spreading anti-Semitism. We're not racist here. This is about religion and how it's affecting people. How it's affecting people today. These extremists, these Jewish extremists, these Zeists, are becoming very popular in Israel, unfortunately. And they have been caught, soldiers have been caught torturing and taking full advantage of Palestinian prisoners, doing all kinds of torture, including forced intercourse. Not just of females, but males as well. Full humiliation. Full-blown racism. And there are people who are trying to put these soldiers on trial, and there are people who are rioting in those soldiers' defense, claiming they have a right and are heroes for doing what they did to those prisoners. So, and of course, not all Jews, and not all Israelis, because not all Israelis are Jews. They do not all approve of what is happening. Thank goodness for them. They need to fight harder. Well, I am not encouraging violence. They need to stand up stronger. They need to resist with as much peace as possible, but it is so sad. Like, I don't know if there's a way to speak to these people that are so violent. If there is, I hope we find a way soon, because it's really getting out of hand. The Prime Minister himself of Israel is a Zeist, and was just recently in the U.S. trying to push for us to go to war with Iran. And it doesn't really matter who wins the election, unfortunately. Not when it comes to this matter. Because a lot of our congressmen are in, or I don't know, a lot of the people that decide whether or not we go to war and can vote on it are paid off by him. We send a lot of money to Israel, and they get our congressmen. They're the people in there that are vigorously applauding to Netanyahu's speeches are in his pocket. They are well paid by him. And so, if we go to war, people are saying it will most likely erupt into World War III. And that's ultimately what it's going to boil down to being about. World War III. Being about the fucking Zeists who take the Torah whatever other books they have so seriously. And honestly, I think I wouldn't, I don't think this, because I don't know this for sure, but I would not be surprised if they were trying to commit genocide. Because their scripture endorses it over and over and over again. And people got to realize this. I've said it before on this channel, and I will say it again many times because it's such a damn good analogy. It's like taking on a house without checking for mold, without checking. Taking on a religion is like taking on a house. When you know nothing about the religion and you just accept it, you just accept how it's advertised to you. That is just like accepting a house without checking the foundation, without looking for mold. It might not be a house worth taking, but you take it anyways because it sold that well to you, or because it was mommy and daddy's, or grandma and grandpa's, or friends. Just because they're giving it to you and they advertise it to you and they've enjoyed it so much, it doesn't mean it's a good place to stay. You have to look for the cracks. You have to look for the mold. I don't know how to do that kind of crap. And that's not my style of living. But I've been around people that have. I've helped work in houses. I've helped build houses. There's a lot of stuff you gotta look for before just buying a house. A religion is no different. You have to be very careful. And Christianity is half of this. Yes, thank goodness they don't have nearly as big a problem with the extremism, but they still have a tremendous problem. Like they do have a problem with the extremism, but just on a much smaller level, smaller scale. But they also have a tremendously huge, oh, that's not a great word, because that's usually a word that denotes positivity. They have a massive issue with abuse. And fake, non-caring pastors that are just in it for the money. And I'm not saying they're all bad, but these are the issues of all of them, you know? They don't have extremism. They don't have extremism as big of an issue, but they do have scammers and abusers in the thousands. I mean, at least they're not unaliving their victims. Just molesting and forcing intercourse. Or manipulating them into it. It's all because there are cracks and mold in the house. Some people manage to live in certain corners of the house that don't have mold, or that aren't on the cracked portion. Those are the good Christians. Those are the good Jews. Those are the good Muslims that are staying away from the bad parts of their religions. They're the ones that represent well. Good for you guys. But we have all those crummy representations because of the mold and the cracks. and the termites and all the other broken house analogies. It's great that you found a positive corner, but we have to talk about the issues, because the issues are what's creating the massive overall problem that y'all don't want to talk about, that even the news doesn't want to talk about. A lot of the news doesn't want to share what's going on in Israel or what's going on in England and in Germany and in France. It's an absolute horror show. And it's all because people believe in a deity that isn't exercising its power. It's all hearsay. It's all in a book. If World War III happens, it's because of fairy tales. It's because people were fighting over whose god had the bigger penis. And because God has refused to come down and tell us. He has left peace up to us. He's never going to come down and tell us this religion's right, this one and everyone else is wrong. He's never going to do it. A butterfly might fly in my face, but where's the real sign? Where's the real sign in the sky? Where is the writing on the wall? Where is the absolute divine power of God to prove which religion we should bow down to? Where is it? Where is this great power? Why do you have to hold a gun or a sword to my head to convince me? Doesn't that come off as weak? That's why people don't want to believe you. That's why people don't want to accept you. Because, I mean, you're being unfair. You're being unjust. This is not justice. I understand that you've been hurt, that you've been raised to be the way you are. But where is the logic? Why is it? Maybe this is not a conversation even worth having, perhaps. Because I'm just going to lose my head in the end. Either way. In frustration or literally. And while I do not believe they will ever be successful, there are some people out there in the Zeists community that literally believe that they themselves in their Zeists community should be the only ones left alive. That everyone that's not like them should be unalived. Let me show you a clip that someone sent me. Name, rabbi, and everything on there. And listen to what he says. It is absolutely wild.
You have 6 billion idol worshippers who makes God angry every second of their life. Indian, Chinese, Japanese, Tibet, Nepal, Thailand, so many. India alone is 500 million. China is 2 billion. So many, 2 billion Christians, which are idol worshippers. Between Chinese, Hindus, Buddhists, and Christian, at least 6.5 billion people are idol worshippers that, according to the Torah, do not have the right to live. Idol worshipper goy, it's death penalty. Not only Jews, even a goy who bow down to an idol, who believe in JC, deserve death penalty.
So yeah, how's that for extremists for you? It is absolutely disgusting. And then on top of that, you have these books outside the Torah that discuss arranged marriages of minors. And there are people that argue against, that say, no, it's just a misinterpretation. But there are also people that argue for, no, this is what it means. And I'm going to share those passages with you in the links. And I don't do this to try and spread hatred or anything like that. This is about self-reflection. This is about awareness. This is about understanding the full depth of religion and how far it can go, how dark it can get. And yeah, it's great that Christianity doesn't have the extremism, but the fact that they have all the scammers and abuse that they do just goes to show that, you know, the mold still made it in. It may not show up in the same areas in the same ways. The termites may have to find a different route, but they spread. They find their ways in, even if they don't show the same way. And I've shared how dark they get on, you know, as part of my own story, because I'm connected to a little bit of that in the curricula that I was raised on learning growing up. And even had a couple of my siblings in that environment, unfortunately. But they were lucky. They were fortunate to not suffer too much. It's not like not to the degree as others. But we have to talk about these things. We have to acknowledge that these problems are there. Because this central deity that all three of these religions think is real and performs miracles has still yet to come down and show us and tell us himself who's got it right. And that's ultimately, if it begins, why World War III is going to begin. Is going to happen. Because the Jews and Muslims are still fighting about whose version of God is right. Even though he never comes down and tells them. All they have is dead people's opinions. It's sad. This is horrific. But the only way we can really all get it to stop is if people start coming clean, start opening up, start having these discussions, start being real, start being self-aware, start addressing the moral issues within these religions, as well as the logical fallacies of God not coming down to address them himself or clarifying these things. Jesus isn't coming back to clarify things. I don't think we really need Muhammad to come back to clarify things, because he's a pretty violent guy. We understand what he was about, because his followers, his extremists, portray it quite well. And then these Zeists, they're basically followers of Moses. They say it's Yahweh, but it's really Moses. It's really Moses. Moses made all this stuff up. Maybe other writers made up some of the other books, but Moses was supposedly, and Abraham, of course, but Moses is the one that did a lot of the rule writing. Like, when are you guys going to acknowledge that it's just all man-made? It's just people hungry for power. Maybe some of them knew some magic tricks. Maybe they were just really good at giving speeches. Maybe they were great at sounding convincing. Maybe they had a lot of powerful thugs on their side to help enforce their will. And then they just wrote whatever they decided they wanted afterwards. They edited history, maybe. Like, why not? When people do bad things and they don't want others to know, they will do anything to hide it. And if they're in power, they have that much an easier time trying to hide things. But we have to stay aware. Everyone's got to stay aware. They have to examine these things. We have to examine these things for ourselves. We cannot just give ourselves away to what a fancy talker has to say. I mean, look at me. I'm no fancy talker. I stutter and mess up what I have to say all the time. But I share this because people need to wake up. People need to understand how the cracks and the molds and the termites affect us. Even the ones that are in the best corners of these religions. There's some good corners. There are good people. But the thing is, it's more so usually the individuals. There's no safe denomination. There's no safe... I mean, you might have some safe individual churches out there that are very small and very family friendly. Yes, those definitely exist. I've been to those. But you can't trust an entire denomination. You can't trust large numbers. You have to be very cautious. You cannot trust corporations in religion. Because there are cults out there. And they will sound just as convincing as the rest. You have to be on your toes. But the more we make this aware, the more we talk about this, the more we challenge the fact that God does not do miracles like he does in the Bible, the more people will wake up, the more people will understand, and the more people will leave these religions. They will find their personal power, they will find their freedom. They will find their reason to live. People think religion gives people a purpose. Only certain religions. The others just make slaves of you. Mental slaves. The Christians that are the most free, that aren't assholes. I mean, I would even say there are versions of Christians out there that, just because of their perspective, have it all right, in a way. It excludes the resurrection. It would exclude a lot of things that the regular mainstream Christianity believes. But I've met Christians out there that I would 100% agree with their perspective, and they would, and by their definition, I could call myself a Christian, but I don't, because it would just confuse everyone. Plus, no. Never want to go back to calling myself that, to be honest. Nothing against people that want to call themselves that, especially if they're logical and skeptical and smart about their beliefs. Because like I said, in some ways I could call myself a Christian, but only because it would be an incredibly different version from the mainstream. And so that's why I don't. But the vast majority of Christians and Jews and Muslims, maybe there are perspectives of Jews and Muslims as well out there that would apply to me as well. I mean, shit, I am circumcised. But there are versions of them that prefer peace, that do not want war. And that is great. But I would wager the majority of them still kind of have their mainstream way about it, of believing in the supernatural, and in, maybe not accepting and being okay with a lot of what Moses said was okay with, or with, the way they treat Gentiles and such. But I know there are different shades of, just like there are different shades of Christianity, there are different shades of Judaism and Islam, and so there may be versions that could apply to me, to where I could be Muslim or I could be Jewish. I mean, there are things about me that, if you look in the Buddhism religion, that they applied to me before I even knew anything about Buddhism, because of just the way I view things, and just what I came to believe on my own from my observation of the universe. Someone that knew more about Buddhism than me, that was talking to me about it, they're like, dude, you're already a Buddhist, you just don't know it. Like, you already have like all the traits of it. was like, oh, okay. So, and yeah, I don't go around calling myself a Buddhist because I don't practice, because in Buddhism, you don't have to, there are, and I'm pretty sure it's one of the, well, okay, to be fair, I'm not an expert on it, but, you know, there's a version of Buddhism that believes that you do not have to wear the robe and shave your head and all that stuff to be a Buddhist. You can practice the ways of Buddhism in behavior and in, you know, just in the way you live. And in, you know, and in what you believe. It's really about how you treat each other and yourself. That's what really makes you Buddhist. And that's actually what I like about it. It's like, because it's, you know, it's, you're already behaving logically and you're like, oh, well, cool, that's the logical way of living is spiritual. Well, awesome, they go hand in hand. That is fantastic. And that is, you know, that's ultimately what I'm trying to share, that, you know, logic and spirituality do go hand in hand. You should be able to be skeptical about it all. But you should also be able to have your own religious experiences. You don't have to believe in a specific deity to have religious experiences either. Just have some really good drugs. No, you don't even need that, really. Yeah, you don't. You really don't. You can just, in fact, I believe it's his name, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I believe, the astronomer, that said just looking up at the sky at night full of stars, you know, is for him a spiritual experience, and I get that. I definitely get that. You don't need drugs to have a spiritual experience at all. And I actually had plenty before I left Christianity too. They cemented me in what made me believe it for so long. But yeah, then I learned spirituality is more than religion. It is more than any one religion. It cannot be contained to just one. In fact, it makes a lot more sense when you study multiple. But when it comes to the Abrahamic faith, there may be a few concepts that they have right, but there is a lot of unfortunately messed up things in there. And I say it's time we talk about it. So, leave your comments. Let's hash this shit out. Let's stay logical about it. I know a lot of people aren't taught how to think critically, but now's the time to learn. And talking is the only way we're gonna make this happen. It's a lot better than using guns and knives and swords and threats and disrespect. So let's be respectful, let's be logical, let's be skeptical, let's look at the evidence. And yeah, definitely check out my links, because that's the real world for you out there. If it hasn't hit where you have yet, like it hasn't with me, thank goodness. Count your blessings. And if it has hit where you're at, stay safe. Stay safe no matter where you are, no matter who you are. And I hope I will see you again next time. Until then, my friends, stay safe and farewell.